Hi everyone, it's Sister Folk, and welcome to the optional instructor video critiques. I am excited to go over your magazine spreads with you all and provide some additional feedback. And I'm going to start out by providing some just general reminders before you turn in your first big project. Okay? Also, super funny story while I'm getting my screen share set up here is we have been traveling for the last 3 days, moving from San Antonio, Texas to Arizona. And so I am at a McDonald's right now, an awesome place that I found that has some free Wi-Fi. And so we are, it's been a crazy few days, us and our little boys and our cat in the car for 3 days. So here we are. A few things for a reminder. First of all, before you turn in your final project, please look over this list of the min expectations. Treat them like a checklist and make sure you have each of the things that you need on here, including, for example, your headings, your pulled quote, the images that you need to have taken this semester. Okay, go through each of these, make sure you have them. Also, as a reminder, please always turn in your final projects as a PDF. Definitely don't turn in any InDesign documents, okay? That's extremely important. And don't forget that project report, part 1 and part 2 that you filled out in Word. You need to have that saved as a PDF as well and turned in, okay? So make sure you check this as well before you do your final submission. Let's go ahead and jump over and get started on our magazine spreads. I'm going to pull each one up. I'll look at it for a few seconds, and then I'll provide you with some tips and some feedback. I will go in the order that you have posted your 3-page spreads on this initial post, okay? I think 1 or 2 of you have uploaded a different version, and so I'll try to jump down to your old version when I get to that one instead of doing the first version. Okay, so Penny, let's go ahead and get started with you. First of all, I had looked at yours earlier, and I just want to remind you, be sure to turn those hyphens off. On each of your text boxes, you need to remove those, okay? Another thing that I think would be great is if possibly you could move this title so it's in a little bit more of your white space as opposed to overlapping with the area that you want to be really crisp and clean and clear, which is the temple in the background. Okay, you want to look at this title and you want to look at the image, and then everything else is secondary. But right now, your 2 main things are competing with each other, so it's creating a bit of visual tension here, as opposed to having your headline actually not competing. Also, I'd recommend probably taking off this transparency or pulling it down a little bit so the temple is really impactful when you look at it. And also, you have some not symmetrical white space on the sides here. If you want to keep this, make sure you have the same amount of spacing on each side. But I would recommend instead using this image and doing a full bleed to pull it off the page, which is going to help it look a little bit more contemporary, as opposed to like something that had to have a margin because it was before we could do full bleed printing, okay? Any image that you pull off the side of the page is instantly going to update your design and help it look more modern. Also, I'd recommend making this type a little bit smaller, okay? Let's jump into your page 2 and page 3. I would increase the space between your writing here and this nice white line you have. See how you have a little bit of room to breathe on the side and on the bottom, but not any room to breathe right here or right here between where your letters end and between this line. Okay, I'd also pay attention to making sure your subtitles are left aligned with your columns. This one is bumped over a bit and this one is bumped over a bit. So just make sure whatever choice you make, they're nice and consistent. I think the left align is the one that I like the best. Also, double check to make sure you don't have any kind of widows. Especially, you're going to turn off the hyphens, so you might end up with the word obligations down here. Play around with the sizing of your columns so you make sure you get rid of any of those widows, okay? Also, I would eliminate this image because you already have it on that cover page, so you don't need to be redundant and have it in 2 places. It looks like you've just chosen to put it there because you had some white space. So I would play around instead and make maybe your columns a little bit more narrow. Make a nice crisp line along the bottom down here where maybe the columns end. And then you're going to have some latitude to increase the sizing of your images, which this image is begging to be made larger. And I think this kind of space you have there, it'd be good if you could make this image a lot, and then that some of this height and this under the page and over here is good. And so just keep on playing around. You may not need these borders once you, and that's fine to limit them into nice columns or nice and tidy. You could even consider touch too. Imagine if you made this image 3 times larger and it went off down into margin and had nice texture. That would eliminate some of the things to do right now to fill some of that white space. Okay, so ideas, you're definitely elements of fine-tuning there between this draft and your final draft. Okay, good luck, Penny. I look forward to seeing what you come up with. And I think you're correct me wrong, I believe you uploaded a second draft. I'm going to go down to your draft more toward the end of the video, okay? So that will put Carly, and I will just take a second to check each of you off the list. I have Carly, your design overall is looking really good. I'm loving it, especially your very dual elements like this broken vessel I have over here on the left. Your headlines are looking good. I'm not sure if it is, I think it may be left. It might not look like it is truly left your column. I love how you did your justified column. Make sure you turn off the high well, because I think I see a few. Two main issues right here is a lot of shapes going on. I would consider making these background colors go off the side of the page as well, as perhaps this image as well, and maybe these images too. Pull them all the way off so you don't have this kind of awkward visual space where there's a lot of things going on. The main problem on this page is there's so many lines, broken shapes. I get a bit confused. Okay, so pull the shape off the page, you're automatically going to eliminate some of the problem, like the problem you're having right here with this line ending on your shape line and these lines. It's making you not want to read, making your eye just kind of get a little bit confused and try to work here. So I would recommend pulling these images off this. You don't have to have it consistent, so it's okay to have a border on this side but not on this side, right? Eliminate, if you have a stroke on the shape down here, I would to eliminate that. Date a little bit in shape if you add a stroke to it. It's a little bit more something they did in like the early 90s, have a strong thing. So off most of the time. I think things look a little bit more modern. And then I might make this image either smaller, but you could do it, and so it comes, you just have the bottle, and then you make bottle large. Just kind of play around with this shape right here and with the background shape you with all the angles. Like I mentioned, this is a main point of kind of some visual confusion. The other thing is over here you have white font on an image that has some white color in the background, which is making it a bit illegible. So I would recommend probably taking this paragraph you have and tucking it up into this space that has some more saturated color. You could align it with your title. You could even consider making this image larger and also making it a full bleed. If you did that, it would give you more orange space to kind of tuck a paragraph or two in here. And it's fine to even only have one paragraph. A lot of magazines you look at on the main page, they may even just have 2 or 3 sentences, and then it carries on over here. All right, final thing is I'd probably recommend bumping this little line up here, and so it's kind of just tucked there and not something your eye travels to. Instead of, it's almost forgotten about, which is the goal. Okay, I'm liking your colors. I'm loving your images. You have some really nice contrasting typography. I can tell it's both sans serif, but this one is nice and bold, which is great. This shape looks a tiny bit awkward, and I'm not quite sure what to recommend because it's not wrapping here. It's only wrapping on this side. So I don't know. You may have already tried it with a square. Try it. If you haven't, do try it with a square. See if it looks a little bit more cohesive with the angular shapes you already have on the page, because you have a lot of triangles and square type polygons, and then this circle kind of throws it off a little bit. So see if you like it better with a square, and that might kind of eliminate this little bit of trapped space you have in here. Okay. Otherwise, it's really coming along well. So looking great. Thanks for your submission, Carly. Looking forward to seeing your final. Okay, Caitlin, you submitted another one with images, so we will jump to yours at the end. And Zach, I believe you opted in as well, so let me just double check here. Yes, you did. Perfect. Okay, let me just look at this one. Nice contrasting typography. That's one of the first things I noticed. I really like the white font on the blue background. This is a bit of a tangent. It's called when you have two different elements that are too close together. So you need to add a little bit of white space in between where this column starts and where your black stroke box ends, okay? Even this is a little bit too close. I would say, I think if you're going to keep this black stroke box, it would look really nice to justify your text. So it's completely rectangular as opposed to a straight edge here and a ragged edge here. So you have a nice crisp line that runs along this edge and a bit of white space and then a nice crisp black line. Okay. Also make sure you turn off your hyphens as well. I'd love to see you go bigger on your title. I feel like you probably think this is big enough, but you have this weird trapped white space here. So if you're going to have that, you probably either need to get rid of this box or just make this larger. You could even do something cool where you move this box down and you have where justice, love, and maybe you have a line through the and overlaps on top of the line, and then mercy meet is underneath it or something. Okay, so think creatively in terms of how you can make these elements interact as opposed to kind of exist in a separate space. Also make sure you have some space up here. This is too close to that black line as well. Okay, I like your image down here. Obviously you didn't take that, so it looks like you took these two. This page is working a lot better in terms of how everything is aligned. There, you have some inconsistency. This title is left aligned. This one isn't. This one isn't. I would recommend doing the same font size, because see how this is a little bit bigger and then this is even bigger. I would make sure those subheadings maintain the same size, as well as color and typeface, which you've already done the last two, but make sure to include the same size as well. I like these images. They're really nice. This is a great pull quote. I like how you have this here. Finale should be able to fit here. I'm not quite sure why it's not. Make sure there's not an enter or something there. That'll help this line look even better, because right now not having finale there is making it look a little awkward. Who would come in the meridian, be sure to take the word meridian off, and then you could have ... and then continue it on page, whatever that page is going to be that you continue it on. The only thing I would say is you're playing a little safe with your image sizes. I'd love to see you get bigger, okay? Especially this one. You could make it a lot bigger. You could have it kind of come into this column, or you could make it a full bleed. That's going to cover up some of this background shape, but the images are the most powerful thing you can do. And you never want to have just your images be in line with your columns. That's kind of a dated look, okay? So instead, you're going to take those images, you're going to make them big, you're going to make them overlap things. That's what's really going to help people look at those images, which are one of the main stars of your design. And then if you find that you need to cut off more of this article because of that, no problem. Go ahead and do that. And make sure there's some white space in there too. This looks like it's a contrasting typeface. So you have 3 typefaces. If you do that with restraint, I'm okay with it, but generally we recommend only 2 typefaces. And then I make sure like this is capitalized just for, you know, grammatical reasons. But everything else is looking good. You're on the right track. Push yourself on the image sizes and just pay attention to a few more fine details. Okay? Thanks, Zach. I'm really looking forward to seeing your final. Let's go ahead and look at yours, Tyson. I believe you opted into, let me double check. Tyson. Yep. Okay. So we have some interesting things going on here with these shapes. I like your images. This one's really good. I especially like your cover page with this transparency shape. That's great. That's looking contemporary. The contrasting fonts, how big this one is. You made some really good choices here. I might make this transparent shape even darker to really make sure you can read the white font on top of this white E and white N in the background. So make sure that's nice and dark, because if not, it's going to become a problem with legibility. Okay. I like this pull quote. That looks really nice. Think about terms of a color scheme. I'm not sure this bright purple and this kind of bright fuchsia type color work the best together. Maybe you could pull a dark bluish like from here, or a brown, dark brown, or even this yellow to marry with this fuchsia color you have, as opposed to this highly saturated purple. And so look at the color wheel, see what you think really works with this color, okay? And I think that'll help it look a little bit more professional. Also, pay attention to little fine details like this weird gap you have here. If you're going to have 2 shapes and they're going to be that close to each other, they probably need to be touching on the edges. Make sure you have your hyphens turned off. I think you actually do, but I can't tell. Oh no, it looks like you don't. Blessings looks like it's been split in half. So make sure you have your hyphens turned off, okay? I don't see that you have a like continued on page something, so make sure you do that. If you need to eliminate a few lines in here to get that in there, that's good. The other thing is I'm not seeing making these columns more narrow. Maybe bring them down a bit so you just have some nice, if you have a color, you could just leave it a color up here. Okay, so, and also legibility right here on this line is getting a little bit tricky because you switch to a different color, which is creative and cool. But if there's any part of the word that disappears, that's pretty important. Okay, so pay attention to that. So the main thing I think I'd say is making these columns so they're not, you don't have quite so much type crammed on the page, injecting some more white space, and playing around a little bit more with your colors. Your subheadings are looking great. Oh, and this is an orphan. See how you have a few lines from this paragraph at the top of the column. You want to make sure that you either bump this additional line so you have 2 lines, or you're able to move this one down here somehow, which as it is, I definitely wouldn't recommend moving these 3 words down here because they're going to get possibly cut off when you're printing this, okay? Which we don't print in this class, but it's just a good FYI for you. All right, so those are a few things to keep on working on. Overall, you're definitely on the right track. I'm liking your images, and that cover page especially is looking good. Okay, so looking forward to seeing where you're going once you do some final tweaking. Okay, Crystal, let me double check. I believe you opted in as well. Crystal, yes. Okay. And I don't think you posted again. For some reason, I'm thinking you did. Let me just double check. I don't want to provide you critique on your first version if you have another one you posted. I don't think you did. I think it was just someone had provided a drawer for you that I noticed. Crystal. Oh, Penny, there's your second draft. I missed that one for you, Penny. Okay. Now I got to go back up to you. Where are you, Crystal? Okay, like a broken vessel. Oh, wow. You've done something really interesting with the letters here. First, I thought it was an accident. The A looked a little bit like an accident, but they're all little cattywampus, so I'm guessing that's maybe the font selection. Unless you did that yourself. The E's look the same, so I'm guessing this is font selection. Okay, I really like your justified columns down here. They look really nice. I like that bar down at the bottom. Instead of just having your attribution here awkwardly, I would recommend aligning it with something, either aligning it over here or aligning it over here. And this is a little bit hard to read with all the lines in the background and then this font on top of it. You've chosen white, which is the right choice. You could possibly add like this color, kind of orangey brown stroke. That might help it make a little bit more legible to these letters. Or you could decrease the amount of image on the page and have like a broken vessel exist up here and the image kind of cutting through half the page or only on the top. But I think maybe play around a little bit with some different choices. I like that how big this is. I like that it's a bold choice. So those are great things. Now you just have to make sure that when you look at it, you're able to read it within about 1 second, okay? 2 seconds max. You shouldn't have to look at it and try to read it for more than 1 or 2 seconds, okay? So play around a little bit more, see if anything else comes to you that might be make it even more legible. And then this looks really nice with your justified columns. This is great. I love this nice crisp line around your image. It looks really good. Your columns are great. You have this contrasting. Oh, I think this is that same kind of weird font. Because the S looks a little crazy. That's fun. I like how you have it. Still play around a little bit with that first page and make sure it's okay. And this is really neat, your shape in your background. It's subtle, but it's great. I love how you did that. Okay, this font, not my favorite. I see it a lot. Play around, see if you can find something else that is doing what this font is doing, but isn't this one that's been really used a lot because it's one of those default interesting ones, okay? I can't remember what it's called right now, but it gets a lot of use, so I think it would be more creative, even if you go back to this font that you have on your title page for most of it or for part of it. Although I think the quote isn't quite as playful as this font is, so I like the idea of doing a little bit more serious of a font, a little bit more of a script, so I think you're on the right track with that. And then I'm guessing you took that first image. So the only thing I would really think is maybe you could add a little bit more white space in somewhere. Maybe you can make, let's see, maybe on this page, maybe your columns could start a little bit lower, but you really have a nice amount of white space in between them, which is great because we have a tendency to make them too close together. Okay. This column looks like it's a little bit narrower than this one, and since you only have 2 columns, it'd be great if they would be the same width. And here you have a widow thinking that one word just by its little lonely self, okay? So keep on playing around with that a little bit, but you are definitely on the right track. Mom. Okay, thanks, Crystal. Mom. Okay, let's go ahead and move to the next one. Amber, I think you opted in. Let me double check here. Yes. Okay. I'm liking this big, bold title. I can see that from right off the bat. That's great. Let me glance at your separate pages. Nice big quotation marks like those. There's page 3. Okay. All right, so you have some repeating patterns. You have this shape, which is nice. I really like your first page. You still have a little bit of work to do on it. It feels a little bit like, let's see, you have this on the right side of the page, so maybe you're trying to have an element over here to balance it out a little bit. This is a little bit too small by David A. Bednar. Maybe you could tuck it right here instead and just say David A. Bednar under this part of the word. Or make it a little bit bigger and move it up a little bit so it lives kind of as part of this. Also, I think maybe this is a little bit too much white space in between these two lines. I might move them a little bit closer together. And then down here, you want to make sure the top of your columns is aligned. So see how this column starts up high and then this one is down. You want both of them to look like this. So they have this nice amount of white space between, and it's black, but white space between where the image ends and your column begins. And then make sure your black shape is pulled off the side of the page over here. I can't quite tell what this gray shape is down here. I would probably eliminate that just for simplicity's sake. Okay. And yeah, make sure this is moved down. You have a nice crisp line of where they start and where they stop column. I like your contrasting font size. This is nice and big. Obviously, it's a subtitle. Maybe you could use this typeface as opposed to just doing this one. This typeface, I will say, is another one that gets used a lot. If you could download a more creative, unique font from defont.com, that would be great because I do see this one a lot and it is a little bit dated. So if you had something that is still a font but looks a little bit more contemporary, that would be great. Okay, so let's move on to page 2 and page 3. Oh, you have this shape here again. This kind of just confuses me, so I'd probably recommend eliminating it. And then you have a weird stroke along the edge of the page here. So I'd make sure this gray shape goes all the way off the side of the page and you don't have this white and then dark gray and then light gray. Your columns are looking good. Make sure they start at the same place again so you have a nice crisp horizontal alignment for your columns. This is looking good down here. I feel like you have probably too many fonts because you have this font, then that title one. This is a different font, and this is a different font. Try to only use 2 fonts. So I would keep this one, and then I'd have a really cool, maybe it's this font here for the titles, for your headline, and for anything you want to stand out. If you feel like it's not standing out enough, and that's why you've downloaded fonts, try to do something different. Maybe you take this gray shape, you pull it up, and you have the gray shape end right here. So the Gospel of Jesus Christ could be, for example, on a yellow background, and then you could have these quotation marks, make them even bigger. You could have them be red and kind of be in the background or something. So keep on playing around with this. I like how you're thinking with having it kind of align on the left. Over here, it's not quite aligned, like the edge of the D is not quite aligned with the G and the period. So you need to work on this a little bit more. And usually you don't want anything to run all the way across the page that you have to read. So maybe you make this smaller and put it in a text box or something, or put it in a shape box. So play around with that quote a little bit more to help it kind of feel a little bit more contemporary, okay? And then let's take a look at your last page here. I feel like you probably have too many words on this page. We definitely need some more white space. I would eliminate at least this paragraph, if not a good half of this one, so you have some room to breathe on this column. I'd probably make this column more narrow. Be sure to bring it down from your shape. If you want to justify your columns, it might help the page look even more tidy, which would be good. And then be sure to add end on a period as opposed to in the middle of a sentence, and then say continued on page so-and-so, okay? And that'll help those columns feel nice and tidy, and it'll feel like it's actually professional instead of just part of assignment where it ends in the middle of a sentence because that's the amount of room you had. I'd get rid of this black stroke too. A black stroke on an image automatically dates the image. And consider making this image larger because I don't really know what this image is. It isn't sending me a very strong message right now. There's a flare, and so it reminds me of the flare that's on this temple image, but I'd make it a lot bigger so I can actually see what the image is and try to figure out what message it's conveying, okay? So you want this to really directly relate some part of your story to me, and which right now I'm struggling a little bit to know what that is. Okay, you have a lot of the required elements on there. So right now it's just fine tuning some of the things that you need to do in order to really have your message sent through in your images and have some nice, crisp, clean lines and a little bit more white space. Okay, so I'm looking forward to seeing where you're going with your final, Amber. Thanks for your submission. Okay, and let's see, Jamie, you opted in as well. Great. Okay, I think you kind of went out of order on these images a little bit, if I remember right. So this is your first one, father and the family. Like this image. Okay, I'm on page 2. And page 3 down here. Okay, so I'm guessing you didn't take that intro image, but you took the other two, which is good. One thing I'm noticing right off the bat is I feel like you have too many fonts. This is a different font than this, which is a different font than this one, which is a different font than your headline. Remember, usually you only want to have 2 fonts on any one design piece. If you're feeling really confident, you can push it to 3, but I wouldn't do more than 2 at this point. So I'd probably stick to this font, have that be your contrasting font. I like how you made this letter large. That's good. One of the problems here, though, is you're losing some legibility. You probably could maybe get away with pulling this first paragraph down and tucking it on this darker part of the leaves and hoping it is legible. But where you have these white spaces coming through, the white font on the white background, even in part, makes it difficult to read. It's honestly a little bit difficult down here too because of the lighter green that you have coming through. You could fix that by adding in a transparency box. Maybe you have the transparency box on the bottom third of the image and you have this only one paragraph exists on the top of that transparency box. Also, I'd play around a little bit more with this title here. I like the color choice you made here. That's kind of fun. But maybe instead of doing a stroke, I might have the word the father and family be just yellow, or the father be yellow and the family be one. So imagine if you had the father really big, double the size of it here, the father, and then underneath it right aligned, and the family in black in that same typography, in only 2 lines. And instead of having a center alignment, you have a right alignment, which makes it look a little bit more modern, and you don't have such a large gap between them. So it's just the father and then tucked right underneath it and the family. Or the father small and the family. But I think the message is about the father. So you want that to be the thing that really is strong. Okay, and then this kind of strong black box, I like it if it was standing alone, but since it's on top of this image, it almost detracts from the image a little bit. So if you do something like that, it might make it a little bit more narrow, and I'd have it exist closer to the words as well. Okay, so kind of a heading would look a little bit better if it existed solely up in this space instead of coming down so far and overlapping on your image. Another thing you could do is you could have a transparency shape that goes all the way up and covers maybe a third of the left of this page. So the temple and the trees are 100% saturation. And then you have a paragraph here with your intro paragraph, and then the title that is mostly on that transparency shape and overlapping a little bit onto your image. Okay, so there are some things you could play around with in terms that will kind of help that look a little bit more modern and follow some of those design rules we talked about. Now, your columns are off to a good start. I would increase the amount of space between them by at least a little bit. Consider justifying your columns and be sure you have your hyphens turned off. Okay, I see a hyphen here. Make sure you get rid of any widows you have, like the word created it's on its own line. So you want to make sure you never have one word that's on its own line. And then this font is a font that we see a lot that's pretty overused. So I might use that script font that you already have on your other page. And that will help. You still have those contrasting typefaces, The size and it being underlined is nice and creative. I'm wondering where this kind of light tan color is coming from. Instead, could you perhaps pick up the yellow that you have on your first page or the green? So you have a really strong, nice color scheme. You have the yellow again here, which is good, but I would love to see some color in the background here as well. You could do different cool shapes. You could have a rectangle that comes all the way down the page that's green or yellow or white and black. Always is really nice. Anytime you want to make it look a little bit more modern, you can add black shapes or white shapes to your design, and I think that'll help. And then this page is struggling a little bit. I don't know if the circle is doing you any favors because it's hard to work with. You've done kind of a cool thing where you've done a text wrap to the circle, which is neat, but you don't really at any point want to have the reader read almost all the way across the page. You always want to have those columns. And so even though you have the columns on the other page, it could work to not have a column here if maybe instead it was just a big image and a title. But the reason it doesn't work is because you have to read almost all the way across the page, which is hard. Okay, so I think if instead of having these circles, you had a nice strong column, made this image bigger. I mean, what if this image was 4 times larger? And it's this awesome, powerful image of a dad with his 2 daughters being kissed. A nice, tidy column up here in the right-hand space, and then a pull quote. Okay, so, and then it pulls in those colors from this really strong kind of modern-looking color palette. You have the green, the yellow, the white, and the black. Pages feel a little bit more like they're a little bit more dated. You have a kind of a very muted gray and very muted tan. That doesn't really go with this strong intro page you have, okay? So pull in some of these colors here. You have a lot of the components that you need already in place. You have figured out your quotes, you have your subtitles, you have your great images, and maybe even make this image bigger. That's a great image. I'd love to see it bigger, okay? So you have a lot of the things that you need. Just push yourself a little bit to try to make them have that visual pop that's going to actually keep the person's eye on the page for more than a few seconds. Okay, thanks, Jamie. Look forward to seeing your final project. Okay, I'm going to take a break here, and these will be our first set of critiques. All right, thanks everyone for what you have done so far.